Hey guys, what's up? Thanks for tuning in to watch this video interview with Chef Jacob Schroeder. I did want to give a quick disclaimer that we did film this video in Moxie kitchen and event space, and it is a shared kitchen. So while we were chatting, there was some background noise coming from the kitchen and like kitchen equipment going on. Jacob did warn me about this. In my head, I just did not consider it would be as loud as it actually was. So long story short, there is some like over editing of the audio in this video that is pretty identifiable. So if you guys are listening and you're like, this sounds kind of weird, it's because I had to really cut out a lot of background noise. And there's still some parts of the video that sound a little bit tricky, but nonetheless, it's still really smooth and easy to listen to. I just wanted you guys to know that if you hear something a little bit strange, it's because there were people working 20 feet away from us, cooking up delicious things that you probably have enjoyed here locally in Des Moines. So let's hop right into the interview with Chef Jacob Schroeder, owner of Crafted Food Services and co-owner of Moxie Kitchen and Events. Okay. Today, I'm excited to sit down with Jacob Schroeder, the owner and chef at Crafted Food Services and co-founder of Moxie, a one-of-a-kind event space and shared kitchen that's driving collaboration and entrepreneurial growth in Des Moines. In this episode, we're going to dive into Jacob's inspiring journey as a chef and entrepreneur, his dedication to fostering community through food, and his vision for empowering local talent and businesses. From navigating the challenges of entrepreneurship to building spaces that inspire connection, Jacob's leadership is a powerful example of what's possible in our city. So let's jump right in. Thank you, Jacob.
Thanks for having me.
For joining me. Let's start by telling the people a little bit about yourself and what's kind of led you to where you are today.
Sure. So, born and raised in Iowa. Grew up in a small town. Grew up in a family who had creative roots. My parents were both teachers, but they were both into, like, my dad was in the trade skills, like woodworking. My mom, and they were both into music too. My mom had a minor in piano, classical piano. So there was always sort of creative energy, and they encouraged us to pursue those sorts of things. And in a small town, it seems like it might be a bit stifling for creatives. And so I was definitely one of those kids that was like, I'm getting out of this town. I hate it here. It's boring. There's nothing going on. Can't wait to see the world and do all these other things and see what else is out there. And we'll circle back to how that sort of mentality shifted, but that's kind of where I came from.
Yeah.
It was actually a family friend that suggested that I would be a very good server in a restaurant because I am very, very empathetic. And so that was around the time that I needed to be thinking about what I was going to do post high school. And so I kind of got to thinking about it, and I remembered, oh yeah, I kind of just naturally gravitated towards watching cooking shows, especially when I was at my grandparents' house.
Yeah.
There was a little bit of like cooking at home that I would do just for myself, and it was almost always some kind of chicken and pasta. And I would just tinker around the seasonings and things. And that was just kind of what we had on hand. It wasn't ever like, hey, mom, can you get me this from the store? It was always just, I feel like cooking myself something. So doing that. And then also remembering that I had a couple of the sort of non-relative parents that raised us, the parents of our friends. And two of them in particular were very into food and very into cooking. So the one side, they grow a lot of their own produce. They hunt for, they stock their freezer up and do that kind of stuff. But it's all organic, all very sort of a holistic approach to food and eating. And then the other side of it was, the other family was a little bit, they just loved cuisines of the world. They loved exploring and experiencing things. The father of the house like brewed beer. He made wine for his daughter's wedding, just like really. So I was kind of just sort of didn't realize that I was kind of surrounded by this food centric energy.
Yeah.
And so I got to thinking, well, chefing, working in kitchens, something to do with your hands. That's something I definitely wanted to pursue because I'm a creative person who likes to be very hands-on and make things. it's something that you get to travel with. Because I figure, and this is kind of in the same vein of everybody's got to eat, so no matter where you go, there'll be a job to do. So that to me kind of felt like job security. There's always going to be a need for people. So,
Smart. Okay. Love it.
yep. And I jokingly say, like, yeah, if the zombie apocalypse happens, I'm probably going to be the last one to get eaten because I'm the one that knows how to feed everybody.
Absolutely.
So, jokingly.
I will be on your team doing that. You're the first person I will call.
And then I also realized that it's a very big world. Food is a huge subject. And so I was very attracted to the notion that you can learn something every day and still not know much, even after a lifetime of just learning and growing.
I love that.
So that was very appealing to me because that's another thing is I think I just love to learn. I'm fascinated by, not only learning new techniques or whatever, but the history and stories behind everything.
Yeah.
And then shortly after, once this was all happening, my mom was directed towards Kitchen Confidential.
Okay.
The Anthony Bourdain book kind of took the world by storm. And so I read through that, and it was very appealing to me because he sort of painted a picture of it's a bunch of misfits that kind of come together. I sort of felt like a misfit in a way. I definitely think that, and I think that everybody has their own specific thought process, but like I definitely felt a little bit of an outsider kind of because of the way that I think and who I was and the way that I did things. Because I was always pretty good at staying true to myself. And so that all seemed very appealing. And so I got into it and loved it. I started off as a server at Chili's in Ankeny, which was actually a great start for numerous reasons. The consistency thing is a really big, industry standards and standard operating procedures is something that was really big. I think a huge impact on me because I do sort of observed a lack of that in privately run restaurants. And so it was always something that I was thinking about. But it was also a very successful Chili's location. And so management was on top of the game. It was a very high performing, for what they did it well. And I think that was a great place to get started. And then did that for 6 months and then got into kitchen life. And the more I was exposed to it, the more I encountered, the more I loved it. And sort of the broader picture I'm sort of like chasing and all these just like, So I just, the more I learn, the more I see, the more I do, the more I love it. And it does come at it's a give and take because it is also a very, very hard industry and there's a lot of hard truths about the industry. And that's important because we'll talk about how that kind of ties into my business's goals. So I worked around Des Moines a bunch. I went to the culinary, the Iowa Culinary Institute at UMac. Graduated there in 2009. Worked like crazy. I recall, 7 a.m. to midnight, 7 days a week kind of a thing. I was really good at tweaking my schedule to how I can fit a class in here in between shifts and be running around with my head cut off just to kind of expose myself to as much as possible. Because that's kind of what the Anthony Bourdain book suggested was like, well, if you're not working at least 70 hours a week, you're not doing it right. And it's like, okay, I really took that to heart. So I worked a lot, but it was also beneficial to me because I intentionally was trying to expose myself to as much as possible to try and learn as much as I possibly could.
Yeah.
And so I worked around a couple places in Des Moines. I crossed paths with John Andres, who is now the chef at UMac. At the time, he was the chef at the Sabre Hotel. And I had a connection to that because our jazz band in high school would stay at the Sabre Hotel when we would go to jazz band competition, the Iowa Jazz Championships. We were always like a championship level school in jazz. And so the teacher, Mr. Alan Fire, would kind of spoil us because he's like, you guys are amazing. You guys deserve to be sort of pampered. And so we would stay there. And so I was the Sabre Hotel is super cool. And so when I saw that they had an open job there, I applied to it. It turned out being a very good move for me because John was sort of the first chef that saw the potential and the curiosity and the hunger that I had to learn and question everything and grow. And so after having worked there for a while, he basically gave me an ultimatum and said, you need to get out of this town. Like, you're a big fish in a small bowl. You need to go see the world and experience as much as you can. So I moved to Denver and worked again at a lot of different places. And that's kind of where I really cut my teeth. I got into doing pretty much everything you can think of. from a lot of line cooking jobs and a lot of different kind of scenarios, which range from super high volume, feeding 500 people a night kind of thing, to more intimate, feeding 40 people a night kind of stuff. I had a job as a butcher for a while. That was part of my task list, so I got really familiar with breaking down and utilizing every bit of the animal. And that was the same restaurant that was very farm focused. So it was a lot of stuff coming in from the farmers markets, and we were literally changing the menu almost on a daily basis. And it wouldn't necessarily be a complete overhaul of a dish. It would be like, well, yesterday the duck dish had peaches. Today it's got apricots because they're out of peaches. So I really got exposed to that, and that resonated with me in a lot of ways. And so it's something that I definitely carried with me. I worked at country clubs, and so I got kind of used to dealing with that kind of clientele, which is definitely a different sort of atmosphere. I worked as a cashier for a sushi food truck I also helped prep, and that was one of my favorite employers I've ever had. She's just a gem of a person, and learned a lot. But also, it was a reinforcement of like dealing with people and trying to be a helpful sort of front of house person, if you will. And then I would randomly do these kind of private chefy things. My brother at the time was a music engineer, so he was on tour with all these like musical artists. And when I lived in Denver, Denver's a hot spot for the music scenes, and so he's like, "Hey, you should just make some food and come to that." And so I got to hang out with like Matt Carney. I brought food and got to hang out with Matt Carney, Sarah Bareilles, and what's it called? Insane in the Membrane, Cypress Hill.
Wow.
I got to hang out with Cypress Hill and like bring food in this whole like setup. And so that's where I kind of got a taste for doing offsite, out of event spaces, out of kitchen, catering kind of things. I got a taste for it. While I was there, one of the chefs, again, a good connection, one of the chefs I worked with, Chris Moore, was at the country club. I mentioned one day, I want to travel. I want to go abroad because the Des Moines Iowa Culinary Institute has a French chef exchange program that they sent kids to work there for a couple of weeks. And I didn't get that. I was kind of bummed about that because travel was definitely a part of the agenda. And so I told him, I want to go abroad. And he goes, well, where are you going to go? And I was like, I have no idea. And he's like, well, I worked in Portugal for like three or 4 years or 5 years or however long it was at this 5-star resort. It's got a Michelin-star, 2 Michelin-star restaurant and all these other restaurants and bars and stuff. I could probably put in a good word in for you and kind of get your foot in the door. And so I saved up a bunch of money and did that. It started off with a chef, Luis Anjos, and who at the time had defected from this 5-star resort to do his own thing, and he was just getting his career started. But he was also voted like best chef in Portugal, and so had a bit of clout. But I went and worked for him for a month, and mind you, I didn't have any plan. There was no plan. This was all literally made up as I went. So went worked for him for a month, and after a month, he said, there's not much else I can teach you. What can I do to help? I said, well, Chris really told me that this Villa Vita Park would be a really good space to go. He thinks I should work with Hans, the chef of this 2 Michelin-star restaurant. And he goes, all right, yeah, I still know those guys. I can talk to them and see if we can make it happen. And it just happened to work out that they were looking for an intern. And so I ended up getting in at Ocean, which is a 2 Michelin-star restaurant. While I was working there, the gal I was working with, Christina, was dating the chef de cuisine of the only other 2 Michelin-star restaurant in Portugal, which is not far away. It's maybe 20 minutes away. So I would work at Ocean on my regular days, and on my days off, I would go to this other Villa Joya, and work there. And it was a very sort of different experience, different environment, because Villa Joya they changed their menu every single day, and they were full every single day. So it was much more chaotic, much crazier. It was like kind of just sat in my corner and did whatever I was told to do. And it was really hard to see the big picture there because I was only there for a day or two out of the week. So did that. Once my visa was about expired, I talked to Hans, who an Austrian-born chef, and said, can you help me get in somewhere in Germany? And he goes, yeah, I used to work in Germany. I just sort of had my eyes set on that. So he made that connection. And about a week before my visa expired, I flew out to Germany and kind of rinse, wash, repeat, did the same thing. Ended up at the Zülberg Hotel, which is the home base of, I guess he's kind of a celebrity chef in Germany. But the sort of star on the crown is this 2 Michelin-star restaurant called Oceans. And then, not Oceans, Seven Seas. And
This could be easy.
yeah, right. I know it's just a funny coincidence that they're both kind of nautically themed.
So much water.
Yeah. This is in Hamburg, by the way, Hamburg, Germany. And then there was also a pastry department, like a full service pastry department that they did all kinds of stuff with. And that pastry chef was again voted best pastry chef in Germany at the age of like 23 or 24,
Yeah.
and just total baller.
Yeah.
But then they also had like they had what they called a classic sort of Bavarian, the hunt, the lodge or the hut, the hunting lodge kind of a thing. And so that was like a big outdoor tree trunk roof timber kind of a thing. Everything served in cast iron skillets, all the lederhosen and giant steins of beer, and just massive portions of food. And then they had another restaurant that I would describe as kind of like a nicer sort of neighborhood restaurant. So they had all these like outlets.
Wow.
I spent most of my time in Seven Seas. I got to know the pastry department and just kind of did my thing there. I met somebody there who, the reason that they sort of forced us to introduce ourselves is that she's half American. Like, oh, you're American, she's half American, you guys should be friends. Like, right. Her dad was American and her mom was German or something like that. And so, like, just with the logic, they're like, you should be friends. You guys are like, you're practically related. And so became friends with her. And we were talking one day in the pastry department. She said, I want to go to America and I'm going to stage in all these places. And I was like, don't get let down if you don't get in where you want to go. I sent emails out to 20 different restaurants and I literally didn't hear back from this trip that I did. And the pastry chef, Marco, said, well, where would you go if you could? And I was like, well, it was sort of by accident, but I happened across this restaurant, Hawk Club. The chef's name is Sven Elberfeld. I think it'd be really cool to work there. It's a 3-Michelin-star restaurant. And of course, Marco being a very desired person, he goes, oh, Sven's been trying to get me to work for him for years. I practically got him in my back pocket. I can make that happen for you. And so it was a little bit more, a few more like logistical hoops to jump through, but he made that happen for me. So I spent almost 3 weeks in this 3-Michelin-star. At the time, it was like number 29th best restaurant in the world in Germany, and that sort of was the pinnacle of that whole trip. Because at that point, I ran out of money, so I had to come back home.
Fair.
I stayed in New York because one of the sous chefs that I had was from New York, and he moved back. So when you come into your town, come to New York, stay in our house, you set you up with a bunch of stuff, you can do a bunch of stuff. Okay. So I did that for a month. I started at Babo, which is a pretty incredible experience. The pace of it is crazy. And ended up getting an actual sort of temporary job at a restaurant called the Writers' Room, because they were in between. They had a position that they needed to be filled, and they hadn't found a replacement. So like, you can keep going to all these other restaurants and just stand in the corner and just watch people cook, which is kind of what the experience combo was like.
Yeah.
I pretty much just like flipped bread on the grill and then toast it, but just like watched everything. He's like, or you can like actually get your hands into this stuff and like you can work with us and you can
Yeah.
So that's what I was going to do. In New York, that's when I really ran out of money and had to go back home to Denver. I stayed there for about another year and a half, and that was in 2015. This is when they legalized weed, which is when the housing situation went from rough to damn near untenable, unless you wanted to live in a small space with just other people. And at that point, I had sort of come to terms with a lot of things about my career path and realized that I was kind of done doing the starving artist lifestyle that is working in restaurants. And I still remember where I was standing and the exact dish I was cooking when I looked up and I realized in my own head, I am more useful to society than this, than just being a lookout for somebody. So I'm going to have to reassess my direction and see what's going to happen. I was sort of intent on the base move was to say, oh, I'm just going to get a job at like a retirement home or something like that, something that's easy hours, that pays well, and then sort of assess what I'm going to go. I ended up landing an amazing job. We were having, with my partner at the time, we would get together with one of her best friends and her siblings to do just like dinner at their house on a Sunday night dinner party. And we were talking about, oh, we're trying to find jobs and all this stuff. And this brother said, his name's Ben, said, well, what do you do? I was like, I'm a chef. I'm a cook. I'm a cook. He goes, well, I work at this really cool IT company. We have this crazy cafe. And it's just, they do really cool food and all these like special events. And it's really just fancy. Like, here, took a look at this menu that they just did. And I checked and I was like, wow, this is actually really cool. And so looked into that. It's called Workiva. Ended up getting the job. And that ended up being an incredible opportunity. And I sort of saw it for what it was, because when we started there, the chef would write the menu, the chef would write the recipes. Here's your stuff, execute it. We switch stations every couple of weeks or whatever. And that was fine. It was still a good daytime job with relatively easy hours, really good pay, good benefits and stuff. But when I left there, and it was probably a year and a half after I'd started there, they switched that over to, we write our own menus. As cooks, we write our own menus. We write our own recipes. We change stations every 3 weeks. And so depending on the station, you're coming up with anywhere from 2 to 6 or 8 dishes, which means anywhere from like 6 to 20 recipes that you have to have like dialed in and standardized. And it was also a low pressure environment, because this cafe wasn't set up to make money. It was set up to be an amenity, because Workiva is one of those forward-thinking, happy employees need make for good work. So you can bring your pets to work, you can bring your kids to work. There's a mother's nursing room, there's a gym, there's an arcade, like every amenity you can think of. And so the cafe, it wasn't the end of the world if we didn't like make money. The point was just being really solid lunch. And then there's other benefits to that too. We would do like dinners with like other entities to like persuade them to jump on board with whatever thing they want, whatever they want to do. So I was like, hot damn, free reign to do whatever I want. I really took it as an opportunity to learn and get into a bunch of things that I hadn't had the chance to do, especially cultural cuisines. One of the stations there was in an auxiliary kitchen that you had to come up with a kind of a different format of menu. But I would say, this week it's Lebanese. This week we're doing Spanish tapas, and I would do the research and like look into all of this back end stuff, because I had been exposed to some of these things. I'm like, well, I wonder what else is out there and how we can make this work for this context. And so, not only a great learning opportunity of just like learning about cuisines of the world and cultures of history, but also from a logistical recipe development standpoint, because I was constantly pushing and doing things that I wasn't familiar or comfortable doing and figuring things out. I mean, I remember one recipe took me like 9 tries before I got it. But you're doing that while you're also maintaining a station, a busy station. We would feed anywhere like around 200 people every day. And I remember, especially on the grill station, salmon was a really popular thing there. There were times when I would sell 45 portions of salmon in like 12 minutes.
Wow.
And so like just managing that busy workload while also doing this, like forging into unknown territory, meant that my recipes for the existing menu had to be dialed in to the gram and basically on autopilot. And so I was able to do that. And I was able to do really push my own skill set and sort of the boundaries of what's possible with those kind of things. I was making my own fish fumés. I was getting in subprimal or primal cuts of like there's this, one dish that I would have buy in whole legs of pork that I had to like break down and butcher and then make broth with the bones and render the lard and turn that into stuff. So it was just this whole thing. But having the key to that was having my existing station dialed in so that it was basically on autopilot. And so I was able to do that.
Wow.
And I didn't realize it until after how valuable of a skill that is.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There's a whole, that's an entire career path I could pursue if I wanted.
Yeah.
And it's just a part of my everyday, my day-to-day now.
I've been thinking, as you've been telling me this like story of what's brought you to where you are today, like there's a lot of commonalities in, I think, highly successful and highly creative people that I'm observing here. And that's like, A, you're not afraid to ask for opportunity, which I think is really important. B, you have this like self-possession, I think, like you said before, like you've always stayed really true to yourself. You kind of followed your own interests. But then I'm seeing this like third component, which is like you continuously put yourself outside of a comfort zone. like you've never really let yourself
Nope.
get complacent, which I think is like the recipe
Yeah.
for mastery, but also passion,
Right.
right? I've talked about this before, but really, really fascinating. Okay, so go on.
Sure, sure.
Just to find out, Susie.
No, I love that. So ended up staying there for close to 6 years. I was about a month shy of 6 years. While I was there, I went from working a minimum of 70 hours a week to working 30, 35 hours. And, in my 20s, I sort of let go of a bunch of interests and hobbies and stuff because that's just what was required of that lifestyle.
Sure.
And I don't know that I recommend that, but I love that. I'm slowly trying to get back into something that's not food related that I can use to pass the time. But
Sure.
so I got bored, frankly. And so there was chit chat amongst sort of my sort of following, because in this controlled environment where you see the same people every day, you start to certain people gravitate towards you. And this, because I was particularly uh, pushing boundaries, I think there was a group of people that sensed that. And so they sort of latched onto me and they became sort of a fan of mine. But one of them had mentioned, I go on this fishing trip every year and bring back all the salmon. It would be so cool. Would you like come to our house and like make this cool dinner? And I was like, yeah, that'd be great. And so we talked about that and talked about them, talked about them. That particular event never happened. But again, talking to this person named Derek, I got to meet his family. His family is the kind of people who they want to be friends with their kids' friends. And so their whole thing is you don't knock on the door when you come to their house, you just let yourself in. They into food, they love food. And so it was a very last minute thing. They sent me a message because I had met them and hung out with them, the parents and the siblings and all that. It's great. They're still some of my favorite people. In fact, one of them lives in kindness here. But their parents said, we've got friends coming over and we haven't thought about what to cook. Do you feel like just cooking for like 10 people? And I was like, sure. And so that was kind of the very first one that I did. And it went well. And it turned into doing a few other ones. And my barber that I would go to in Ames, that's where it was located, was also very into food. And so I told him, I did this dinner party. It was so much fun. He's like, I would love to hire you to do something like that. Let's do something like that, because he also loves food.
Yeah.
And so that turned into a couple of things. And then, friends on Facebook with another one of my kind of long time friends. It's fine.
Okay, so your barber showed interest,
hired me for a couple of things. Friends on Facebook would say stuff like, hey, why do I specifically remember, he said, why does my mouth always water every time you post on Facebook? And I was like, he got around to saying, you should cook for the family sometime. And so all these things happening, and then I started telling people about it. Hey, if you're interested in holiday parties, I can do it, XYZ, or special events or whatever. And so I started doing that, and I found what started off as something that was just a side hustle and a creative outlet, because as awesome as Workiva was, we're not doing on the regular basis like a 5-course tasting menu. It is like lunch-sized portions or whatever. So, and I also got to push myself a little bit further into some kind of weirder things that would be really hard to execute upscale. But I found that people really liked having me there to talk about where the food came from, the technique, the history, the sources. If the source has a particular interesting story, they really resonated with that. And so over the course of like 3 years, it kind of started to piece together. This is something I could do. But I also wanted it to be very intentional and not just a private chef catering kind of thing. And so at this point, I've seen, and this is sort of the impetus of a lot of where my ethos comes from. Like I've seen the world, a lot of it. I sort of got the gist of what it's like to be a human. And there are a lot of things that need work. There's a lot of things that are beautiful, and there's a lot of things that need work. And so Crafted Food Services was born of me trying to address those things that I feel like I could address. So, and a lot of that is what I tell people now is I feel like people are disconnected from their neighbors. And that can mean the person next door or across the street. That could mean the cultural groups in town that you're just not even familiar with. That could mean just cultural things in general. We're a very whitewashed city, and so, but there's a lot of amazing non-Caucasian, frankly, people here doing interesting things, delicious things, and I'm just interested in that. And I think that, especially after having traveled, and by the way, in Portugal and Germany, there wasn't not a lot of great English speakers, and so I didn't get taught to very much, but I still was able to hold my own, and was still able to really sort of make this great experience for myself because food is a common language no matter where you go. Everybody has to eat. A lot of the techniques are born, techniques and terms are born from the same sort of dictionary. Like I specifically remember this gal in Portugal who could not speak a word of English would hand me a pepper and say brunoise. And so I knew exactly what I had to do because that's a French term I'm familiar with, just means a very small dice. So I knew how to do that. So that is just kind of an example of what the whole experience is like.
Yeah.
And so, again, despite not having the language connection, we're still able to connect and be friends and get along.
Yeah.
And so that's sort of what the focus of Crafted Food Services is. It's like it uses food to connect and educate people. And I think that a lot of the business is education. A lot of my menus have foreign words that people aren't familiar with. And I love it when somebody says, "What's that? I don't know what that is. I'm not comfortable with it." I specifically remember a couple of years ago, we had palmolive on a menu, which is French cheesy potatoes. And that's what I told her. This is just French cheesy potatoes. Most cultures probably have a cheesy potato dish in the repertoire. This is just the French one.
Yeah.
And so it's an exposure therapy kind of thing. I use gastriques a lot. Gastriques is sweet and sour sauce. What's a gastrique? It's a sweet and sour sauce. Every culture has a sweet and sour sauce. This is just one that I have a particular technique for that I like to use. And so I'm sort of, as a byproduct of these dinners, educating people and exposing people to things.
Yeah.
And the hope is then that they go, "Oh, gastric, I know what that is. That sounds like this would be good on this dish in a restaurant that I'm going to. I'm going to order it." It's just about making people more comfortable with things that they're not familiar with.
Yeah.
And tying it into this is where it comes from, which also I think validates cultures. If there is ever, an issue with something like that, it's like,
100%.
These things are like, we all want delicious food. We've all been cooking for a really long time.
Yeah.
There aren't any cultures that are inherently bad cooks because that's just not human nature. Like we want to make things delicious and we've been doing it forever. So like we all have that commonality.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the goal, is to just get people familiar with what's around them.
Yeah.
But also love life a little bit more.
Oh, I love that.
I think that again, the more you know about food, the more things you recognize on a menu. If you maybe wouldn't have ordered that because you didn't know what palmolive was or a gastrique, then you're like, "Oh, I know what that is. I want that."
Yeah.
So
but also, don't be afraid to ask what's on your menu.
Yeah, exactly.
Your chef wants to tell you.
Exactly.
Your server should want to tell you.
Exactly. And so, that's kind of the gist of it, is to educate, connect people. And that's one part of it. There's also, I'm very sort of uncapitalist in my approach. And so I think that there's a huge room for improvement when it comes to like supporting local businesses, farmers, specialty producers, and all that stuff. And part of that is raising awareness, which is really easy. Hey, these mushrooms came from I can never remember what the town is called. It's up north of Macon, 15 minutes. World-class mushrooms. And like, look at these amazing mushrooms that are right at our doorstep. Look at this amazing cheese that's right at our doorstep. I just met a gal who does monofloral honeys in Indian oils. Holy crap, that's incredible. And so it also is like highlighting the things that are already here, because this is where we're circling back to growing up in a small town and hating it and being bored. I realized that you need to look. You need to try a little bit. It's not going to fall into your lap. The interesting things, the fun things aren't going to just fall into your lap.
Yeah.
They're there.
100%.
There are creative people everywhere.
Yeah.
It's human nature. You just got to find them.
Yeah.
And most of the time, they don't have a platform. They don't have a marketing budget. They don't have a marketing team or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to find them sometimes, but it's worth it. I think it's so worth it, because unless you are interested in just sort of predictable, uninteresting, grid of a life.
Yeah, who wants that?
I don't think anybody wants that. I mean, we all want creativity and fun, new experiences or whatever.
Absolutely.
And so I'm here to push that. I'm here to help with that.
I love that. So you've been doing crafted food services for how long?
It originally, I think I must have started doing the sort of side hustle style dinners in like 2017.
Okay.
2018 maybe.
Okay.
Officially started the LLC in 2019.
Okay.
Switched it to an S corp in 2021.
Yeah, it's clear that you're making big moves.
There's a lot of things. I want to make Des Moines more fun and more interesting and more cool and empower people to have good, work experiences working in food service. So I remember a friend said, what concept do you think Des Moines needs? And I went on for like 45 minutes of like all these things that I would love to see.
I know, because you can make it so inclusive, or you can really niche down, and you could hit a lot of targets with that.
Right.
I want to, you touched on this a little bit, but I want to just capture it here. How does your personal philosophy influence your approach to food catering and hospitality?
It is the lifeblood of it. Interestingly, the working with me, and this came from my girlfriend's dad is a marketer, or has worked in marketing as a writer. And so we sat down and we talked about sort of establishing a brand. And we made a list of like the 10 most important things or whatever. And the food part of it was like number 4 or number 5. It's actually more about the experience. And that's something that came with my time abroad. I mean, working in restaurants, I realized, for me at least, that most of the time people don't remember the specifics of the food. They might remember one thing that really just blew them away.
Yeah.
And this is my own experience too. My favorite dining experience that I've ever had. And I know it was a 13-course meal. I don't remember that much about it. There's like one thing I specifically remember: the lacto-fermented beet greens on the lamb dish. And there was other things that I remember too, but like in the 13-course meal, I remember maybe 1 or 2 elements of the whole thing.
Yeah.
But I remember how I felt. I remember how much fun it was. It was at LIDs in Chicago. They blast gangster rap. It's BYOB. It's batch service. They intentionally kind of mess with their clients. They always start the meal off with something kind of fun. So like the one that we had that night was a little roasted corn puree with like tortilla and lime and cilantro, kind of like a sweet corn bite. But they didn't give us silverware, and it was on a clear glass plate. So what the idea was is you had to pick the plate up and literally lick it off the plate in front of the person eating it. Like, that's fun. I remember that was fun.
So creative.
To me, it felt like a dinner party, like a fun dinner party.
Yeah.
It happens to have a Michelin star.
Yeah.
And so for my business, it's actually much more about the experience than anything else. In fact, when I get around to hiring people, the number one thing on the employee handbook is be a delight to work with. That goes from, and that informs literally every step of it. From doing custom menus, there's a consultation phase where I say, what do you like to eat? What do you not like to eat? What are you thinking? I oftentimes see people that are like, I have no idea what I want. I was like, well, here's how things generally kind of go. You tell me when something sounds good to you, and we'll go in that direction. And so it's very, very customized, custom cut for each individual experience. I'm very good at dealing with people, I think, and just being patient and helping guide people to where they need to go. When I bring, and I've gotten a lot of, this last couple of weeks have been really busy, and people are just flabbergasted that I bring everything. The only thing that I don't provide are like drinking glasses and wine glasses, water glasses. And then I don't do any kind of table decor, any kind of a setup thing, because that in and of itself would be entirely, again, there's entire businesses that do that.
Yeah, we know great people who do that.
Yes, we know great people that do that. And that's, again, in terms of supporting local businesses, if I can't do it, I can tell you who can. And so I bring pots and pans, plates, silverware, napkins, all the food.
Yeah.
I clean the kitchen. I make it look like I was never there. And people are just gobstruck. They're like, wow, this is amazing. Like, one that I did a couple weekends ago, they had the table set. And I was like, I brought my own silverware. And they're like, well, let's use yours then. It's less dishes for me. Like, that's literally the point, right? People, because I've heard stories of sort of the inverse of that, where, they trash the kitchen and then they leave. They have to be there for a really long time. That's another thing, is like, I very rarely show up more than 90 minutes in advance. And I've heard stories of people say, oh, we talked to this guy. He said he was going to have to come at like 10 o'clock in the morning and be there all day long. Like, that sounds terrible. I would not want to have to deal with that.
Yeah.
And so the whole experience is meant to be as user-friendly as possible. People always say, what can I help you with? And I'm like, you can relax. I've got this under control.
Yeah.
So
you've really nailed like the convenience part of the experience
Yes.
too. It's not all about the wow factor and the great
Exactly.
menu and the locality. Like you've also considered like this is a person who is looking for a service,
Right.
and it sounds like you've really matched that.
Yeah,
for them.
that's the number one priority. Is it's more of an experience. It's
Yeah.
more about the experience than it is the food.
Yeah, I
The
love
food
that.
is the food is what makes it fun in the moment. But I think that if somebody goes, wow, that was easy, it's like that's exactly what I'm going for.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
That's certainly what I look for when I outsource anything.
Right.
We're gonna pivot a little bit. I'm excited to pick your brain on some of like the industry trends, if you even are into the trendy
Sure.
stuff. What trends are you seeing in the catering and hospitality industry right now?
I mean, I see a little bit of, and I will say I'm far from an expert on this. I can just tell you what I've casually observed and the things that sort of crossed my plate. There's still a huge market for the traditional giant winnings, but I think that in general, the experiential dining thing is catching on in a really strong way.
Yeah.
People, regardless of even if it was a subconscious thing, people want to know the story. People want to know where this thing came from, where they're located, their own ethos and practices and stuff. I sort of think about, and this is something that is true, especially in Des Moines. People are like freakishly loyal to people. You look at a lot of the way that restaurants are named, and they make it the way that the general public talks about it. When I see it on like a Facebook post or whatever, if it's got a person's name, it's as if that person is there running the show.
Sure.
Bubba's, not called Bubba's. There isn't a Bubba. That's just the name of the restaurant. St. Kilda's, as if there was a St. Kilda, a patron saint in hospitality or whatever. Simon's is another one, and he actually changed his name to Simon. Like, that dude has a freaking cult following.
Oh wow.
A well-deserved cult following because he's very warm and hospitable.
Yeah.
And it's a very fun experience, but people are like freakishly loyal to the entity, the person that they think is like behind all of this.
Yeah, absolutely. Are there any shifts in the industry that you're particularly excited or concerned about? And it doesn't just have to be like local. I mean, it could be like as a whole.
Sure. It's a two-edged sword in that the well-being of the employees in hospitality are they're making a lot more noise than they used to. I mean, even in my lifetime, even in the 15 years I've been doing this, we know kitchen employees and restaurant employees basically being disposable, being just bodies to get things done, working themselves to death for like not livable wages, just like really, really, really tough conditions that's not as acceptable anymore. In fact, I don't even think that you can, the way that I staged abroad, I don't even think you can do that. I don't think that restaurants are allowed to have volunteer work. Essentially, that's what a stage is you go somewhere to just be in the space and learn what you can from experiencing it. I don't even know if you can do that anymore.
Yeah.
Which is a huge, like, that sucks because it's harder to learn.
Yeah.
It's harder to kind of like reach new things that you normally wouldn't get to do.
Yeah.
Because the only way to do it is you have to go and work there full time. And it's like, well, if then you go bouncing around every 6 months and that gets complicated.
Or not making any money.
So like on the one hand, wellness is important, and I'm 100% here for that. That was another one of the important things for me is to try. I'm chasing a sustainable lifestyle where I'm working 25 hours a week. Long ways from that, but like it's very good that we are respecting people's just basic humanities now. But I'm also just a little bit worried about the future of the industry. I also sort of say, and I say this about a lot of things. I think about Icarus a lot, the Icarus principle, Icarus story. If getting to where we are currently requires this much sacrifice, then maybe we're going too fast. Maybe we need to slow down and like lower the expectation of what we should be being served if it's causing all of this chaos, I suppose.
Sure.
If it's not sustainable, then should we do it? And that's a I don't know the answer to that question, but it's something I think about a lot. It's like, well, if this is what it takes for us to achieve XYZ, then to me it's not worth it.
Yeah, this is a great segue into my next question, which is what role do you think wellness plays in the future of food and beverage? And that can be on the labor side or
Sure.
with quality of food.
I think people, like I said, I think people are more interested now in the farm to table movement than they ever have been.
I love that farm to table movement.
Yeah.
Never really heard it like that.
I mean, it's been going on for a long time in a lot of different things, but it all just depends on the reach, right? There's a lot more people that are interested in it now than were. I mean, it kind of started back with that. I'm probably not fully informed, but like Shea Beneath was kind of the start of that, right? And in California is when it really sort of started to catch on.
Sure.
And so I think that there's always going to be people that care and always going to be people that don't care. And I think that it might be some of the what's the government action essentially policy. It might be policy that causes people to change their like sort of lifestyles. I've heard it said that what is going to cause people to care about global warming is the fact that you can't get house insurance anymore because the weather is so catastrophic. These insurance companies aren't insuring people in coastal states anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, how long is that going to last until somebody says something about it?
Sure.
And so kind of in that same vein, despite, and again, I'm not an expert on it, but my perception is that we are kind of getting progressively more unhealthy as a culture. And that combined with the whole health insurance situation here, which is very untenable, there's going to be, I would assume that there would be a breaking point where we're like, oh, we can't be tolerating this mass market, mass produced commodity, not good for your long-term wellness, like foods. It's not working because there's literally not a population to support it anymore.
Yeah.
And we can't get insurance to like fix a lot of our culture is we will cause a problem and then sell you the solution. And I don't know how long it's going to last.
Yeah.
So
I know it's like not their fault, but I just think so many people, are misinformed. They're not born into a situation or are led by great mentors or get to travel or meet someone kind of shifts their perspective in a way, which I've always argued is a bit of a luxury when you're put in that position. But I think there's so many people that just don't get the privilege of real information and don't know that what they're doing is bad for them.
And proper headspace too. That's something that I do. It's a critical thinking thing. And a lot of it is because very little of any of these health and nutrition related things are like black and white. Each individual person is its own thing. And so, the hard facts are helpful too, knowing about macro and micronutrients and like balancing diet and all that stuff is great, but also like just being in the right headspace. Like if you're like, all right, if I do X, then Y is going to happen. And it's not necessarily like that. You got to have to think about like long-term. It's about changing habits. It's not about like a quick solution. And so again, that's something that I do some writing material to supplement some of the services that I do, especially my cooking lessons. And it's literally the one is it's all about headspace, about cooking without a recipe. And it's kind of like, here's how you kind of want to approach this from a headspace perspective to be successful.
Yeah.
And so I think that's a really important part of it too.
Absolutely. I feel like we could talk all day about wellness and sustainability.
Sure.
Let's talk about so sourcing local ingredients is clearly important to you. Can you talk about your relationships with local producers and how these partnerships shape your menus?
Sure.
Inform your creative process.
I definitely I prefer to have a list of ingredients given to me and say, this is what you have to work with, make it work, rather than you can make whatever you want. That's actually a nightmare scenario for me.
Yeah.
I hate that. Like the things that I think I've had the most success with are when I just did a dinner at the Wallace house. The theme was squash. come up with a 3-course menu that uses squash as much as possible. I love that. That was great. I had a really fun time with it. And so, yes, it definitely helps to kind of see what's available. I kind of have 2 different circles of farmers and producers that I work with. They're the ones that I have like worked sort of intimately with to help them with their businesses. And that would be like Joy Grow Mushrooms, Simple Life Farms. Those are kind of the 2, I think the 2 that I think of the most. And that is literally like, that is a bit more of a specialty product that I want more people to know about. So like I'm talking with Joy Grow, I remember taking a 10-pound case of mushrooms of all these beautiful varieties and knocking on restaurants' back doors and walking in and putting it on the table and saying, look at these mushrooms. Here's the guy's contact. You want these on your menu.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That kind of effort.
I just saw them on a menu. There was a Chintro.
Yeah.
They had a mushroom gnocchi, tofu gnocchi situation.
Yeah.
It's really good.
Yeah, exactly. So that kind of work. And those are people that I'm on a first name basis with. I've got them in my phone. I can call them to pick brains or a last minute order on something. I just got a wheel of cheese from Simple Life Farms. I asked her where she was at with her manchego this year. And she goes, I got 1 wheel left. I was like, do you want to sell it to me? And she goes, yeah. So there's those kinds of relationships that I've worked a little bit more intimately with and I would consider friends. And then there's all the ones down at the farmer's market. There's a huge variety of farmers and the produce that they grow, especially in the farmer's market season. And I try to get down there every week, partially for a little project that I have undergone where I'm tracking the produce that's there and how much of it is there. So I literally I jokingly call myself Captain Clipboard because I'm down there and I literally do tally marks. All right, this guy's got asparagus, radishes, potatoes, and onions. And then I go to the next one. I'm like, oh, that's asparagus again, another tally mark. And then just go through the entire farmer's market like that. Wow. So I've gotten really intimately familiar with who's there, what they usually grow, who's kind of got the good stuff, or who does, And so I'm down there, and oftentimes those are menus that I love to do where it's literally completely on the cut. That's how we do the menu for one of the events that I do called the Plant Life Pizza Picnic. That I literally go to the market, I gather my data, I look at what looks good, I write the menu on the spot, and I go back and buy it.
Yeah.
And then
so important.
I know, right? It's fun and it's a fun challenge for me too, because like you're not seeing typical things on the pizzas that we do at Plant Life.
Yeah.
You're seeing interesting combinations, and I say there's no limits. I put Brussels sprouts, breadcrumbs, vinaigrettes, winter squash, sweet potatoes. Like I've literally put everything that there is to put on.
I love that you found a way to like accommodate your own, like the way you like to work.
Yeah.
By having this list, by having these boundaries, if you will. But then you're also just intuitively supporting local farmers, and then you're also showcasing that through the events.
Exactly.
So it's like a trifecta. I love it so much.
Yes.
What's your approach to storytelling through food? Is it something that you can like put into words?
Yeah. Oftentimes it doesn't have to be super poetic. I think that having a very strong sense of empathy, I'm very good at sort of reading people and reading their energies. And so I can tell when you cross paths with a passionate person, I can very quickly tell. And that passion usually shows itself in the way that they do their work, the way that they approach their whole like livelihood. And so very oftentimes, especially I'm picking on Joy Grow and Simple Life because they're my 2 favorite ones, but there's a lot of other farmers and cultural things too. Again, kind of talking about the cultural side of things, the Pomeligo, the gas troops and stuff. It's very simply, I tell other people the exact way I tell you. Every culture has a sweet and sour sauce. Because this dish took a French direction, I decided to go with the French one. If it was an Italian one, then it would be agrodolce. If it was, I don't even know what else is out there, if there are specific words for them. But so there's always that. This is kind of an Italian leaning dish or a Vietnamese leaning dish or whatever. And it's, I pick on those words, those unique things that aren't familiar to us. Because oftentimes we might be being served it, but they call it something different to make it more palatable.
Yeah.
I don't do that. I'm just like, nope, this is what they call it when you're in the country itself. And so that's a part of it. But then, as far as when it comes to specific producers, I've been to their properties. I've seen the way that they run their operations. I've talked to them
Yeah.
a lot about just their sort of ethos and stuff, and it's fairly easy to. I mean, I put my own words on it to kind of talk about what it is to me. And Simple Life is my favorite because I go to these events and I say I don't know how to describe it other than it's the happiest place on earth. When you go there, all of the animals approach you. They want to interact with you because they've been shown nothing but love and tenderness and care. They have all kinds of misfit creatures like chickens and one-eyed cats and three-legged dogs running around, and it's just very apparent to me that they love their animals. They have told me that their goals in their business are to take care of their land and to take care of their flock, and whatever happens as a result of that is how their business works.
Feels like advice we could all live by. Take care of your land, take care of
Yeah, and that's a huge part of my business is just take care of the fundamentals. If you have genuine hospitality, genuine convenience, if things are seasoned and cooked properly, that's all I do. That's all that I'm doing is the basics. I'm just doing them every single time.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of them all the time.
Yeah. What's one thing that you'd like to see change in the food industry to create a more sustainable or equitable future? If you could identify like one thing.
I think that I have a couple of answers for that. One of them is just the reality of capitalism and how things are, and people not valuing food for what it should be. Um, and I don't know how to change that other than becoming a politician or getting somebody on board with like making it make sense. I mean,
Even just like calling it by its name, I think can be really effective.
yeah, I mean, the main problem is money, right? So how do we get more money into people's pockets other than fentanyl spending it on this service that is historically not a sustainable business model? So I'd love to see that. I'd love to see more money in the pockets of the mass of the entire population and to make, enjoying things like this a little bit easier. Um, as far as within the industry, I mean, that in and of itself will take care of a lot of stuff, right?
True.
People get health insurance, people get living wages, can work reasonable hours, they can get PTO, they can not have to work holidays.
Yeah.
That takes care of a lot of things. I think within the industry itself, and I think this is a market to market situation because every city is a little bit different. I would love to see more collaborative efforts. I would love to see chefs involved in things that aren't necessarily related to the restaurant because there's food related issues outside of restaurants too. One thing that I would love to see, this could be a government thing or like a government sponsored thing. Again, farmers market, whatever produce doesn't get purchased by the public gets purchased by the government. It goes to a commissary kitchen somewhere. It gets cooked into something nutritious, delicious, and taste, nutritious and delicious. And then we serve it to people at risk. It is a fact that there are food insecurity problems and we are wasting food. So it gets thrown away. So
seems like a no-brainer.
Seems like a no-brainer. For some reason, it's a hard thing for people to grasp. But that's just like an idea, right? An example of stuff that I would like to see. Having chefs, because chefs are a very good problem solvers. So having them involved in policy, I guess, to kind of just help make markets and communities better.
We'll pivot a bit. I want to talk about plant-based diets because I feel like they're kind of trendy. More people are hopping on them.
Sure.
I and my family have kind of pivoted a bit. So with the growth of plant-based diets and alternative proteins, like nutrients, how do you see these movements influencing your future work?
I mean, it gives me more resources to accommodate people that come my way in regards to that, and that is something that I'm particularly focused on is accommodating any and all dietary restrictions whenever possible, because very oftentimes they aren't considered. They're not given the same amount of attention that everyone else is.
It's like a salad or
a vegetarian entree. Yeah. It's pretty bad times especially when it comes to like catering. Not so much in restaurants. Restaurants are a lot better about it now. There's a lot more vegetarian options. Yeah. But especially when it comes to catering or anything like that. I do my best to take really good care of
I
it.
feel like your menus are like innately plant-based though.
Yes.
Even if
And that
there's like a great piece of
you had mentioned wanting to talk about that. That is very intentional. I think about my menus as a whole experience rather than each individual dish. And so typically in a 5-course menu, there will be one dish that is focused on protein, usually the main course, one dish that is focused on carbohydrates, could be pasta or like a rice or succotash or like risotto or whatever, dumplings, and then everything else is vegetables. I try to sneak cheeses in there. I will admit I'm perhaps a little bit heavy on non-liquid dairies like cheese and yogurt. But generally speaking, yeah, I'm very sort of health conscious because again, in terms of the experience, I'm not trying to sell the Thanksgiving meal experience. I want people to feel sated, but not overwhelmed by the end of the meal. And that's a really tough target to hit because everybody's different. Appetites are different. Um, and so I do my best, but I am very intentional with my portion control, the structure of menus and things like that. And I think that that's just being conscious of people's wellness because you want your clients to be healthy, relatively healthy.
Yeah, totally.
It's a sustainability thing. If you are in a hospital and you have all these dietary restrictions now, then I'm out of a job.
Yeah,
So
or chronic illness, you can't eat anything.
yeah,
Yeah, that's so important. And I think I get the sense that Des Moines is like latching onto that. Like, I think the important people, if you will, are taking ownership of that experience. So I'm eager to see how the kind of conglomerate corporate America follows suit
right.
as they see that market shift a bit.
And oftentimes I'll get some corporate clients who, and I don't know what the expectation would be, but like I do what I do pretty much across the board for everybody. And I oftentimes get a very strong reception to like, oh, this was amazing. And it was like, you didn't kill it with heavy cream. And it's actually, this is really good.
Yeah.
So a lot of the things that would be considered an issue, like in those sorts of things when it comes to restaurants, like I'm doing what I think is the most sustainable and it's resonating. And that to me tells me that people want that. People are interested in food that is, wellness considered.
Yeah.
Not doing, a cup of cream for every like creamy dish of pasta, which is pretty much how they do it. Some of those old school Italian restaurants, if it's a creamy pasta sauce, there's literally like a cup of cream that they've reduced. That's a lot.
I certainly like gravitate toward food that I know isn't going to make me like feel heavy afterward or tired or.
I'm not mad if somebody needs to have a slice of pizza before they go to bed.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
has to happen.
I know, right?
Well, as we wrap up here, I've got just a couple questions left for you. One is kind of a fun question. If you could host a dinner for 5 people, dead or alive, who would they be and what would you serve?
That's a question. Oh man.
And if 5 is too many, because that's a lot of things to juggle.
Yeah, for sure.
You could improvise.
Some people that I'd love to have Jose Andres.
What would you make?
Let me get through the guest list first, and then we'll think about that. It's sort of it. I keep on the name Kenny Shopson keeps flashing into my head because he's one of the most interesting people that's ever been in this industry. I would love to meet Eugene Brazier, who is in the canon, like the French history. There was an era where there was like the grandmothers of French cuisine, essentially. Eugene Brazier is who trained Paul Bocuse, who is practically a patron saint in France. He is one of the most revered chefs, and he passed away a couple of years ago, but he was one of the like OGs. And so he comes from this generation of these very tough, very accomplished women chefs, and I would love to meet her. She's kind of like the standout one. That's 3.
What would you make for that?
Chicken and rice.
I love it.
I I'll leave it at that. I don't know what specifics, but like, I mean, it could be like fried chicken or like fried rice, like a fried rice kind of dish, because I love making fried rice. We probably have to have a meat and cheese board. I've really been, I can't get sticky toffee pudding off of my mind, so that would probably be dessert. Do it with malted milk toffee sauce, like vanilla ice cream. Probably rotisserie chicken, because I love rotisserie chicken. Yeah, I don't know.
I love it.
I'll think more about that.
So like simple. I love that you didn't try to overthink that at all. Or maybe you did. I don't know what happened in your brain just now.
Just
but
things that are fun to eat, things that I love to eat.
yeah, sounds delicious. Let's wrap up here with one more question, and then I'll let you kind of plug anything you've got going on right now. How do you want your legacy to impact the food and hospitality industry?
I hope that people can find a more eloquent way to say it, but I hope that overall that I help in a lot of different ways. I hope that I helped people get excited about food in ways that they hadn't thought of before. I hope that everybody that comes my way feels safe and loved and celebrated in some instances too. That's something that I think that our lives are better when people can become who they are supposed to become, and when they're given agency to just be themselves and to be celebrated for that. I think that, again, capitalism doesn't love individuality, and so I'm sort of the opposite of that. I love individuality. I love everybody's quirks, good or bad, that kind of make them who they are. And so, yeah, I think to summarize all of it, I hope that I helped.
Love that. I think you're on your way.
Thanks.
I think you're doing the thing.
Doing the thing.
Well, thank you again for your time today. I do want you to tell the people what you've got going on.
Sure.
Anything exciting for the month or the year or the new year?
Right now, we just launched ticket sales for the Plant Life Pizza Picnic, which is an event that I am very, very proud of. It is just very, very good vibes, very good food, very good experience, beautiful atmosphere because it's in an outdoor garden, essentially a landscaped property. So tickets are live now. If you want to get them for like a holiday gift, they make a great gift. But you can also buy them for yourselves and experience it yourself. It's a really good time. I've been slowly trying to get this it's all pizza focused stuff. I've been trying to get this, I do a Detroit style pizza night once a month called Big Cheese. I would encourage you to check that out. Sort of one of my hopes with my business is for people to just trust that sort of anything that I do is going to be very delicious and very good. And that is kind of a fun, more approachable, but equally delicious kind of thing that I've got going on. That's about as far as things that are on the books. That's kind of what is going on now. There are some things in the pipeline. So I would say just in general, pay attention to the social media. And when I start dropping hints about things that are going to be coming along, but I'm perpetually spinning many plates. And so I think the more you sort of pay attention, the quicker you will learn about it and hopefully make it a part of your life and something that you love to do. Makes life better. Yeah.
I love that. Well, thanks for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you do.
Appreciate it.
You guys can find Jacob on Instagram at Crafted Food Services. He's also on Facebook. He's got a nice website. And then his event space, Moxie, is on 42nd and University.
Yes. We do a themed monthly dinner every third Thursday that is a very, very fun time and a very, very good deal. Yeah. So I highly recommend people check that out.
And it's a beautiful space. So. Thank you.
Thank you.
You nailed it.
Nailed it.
Good work.